So, still discussing the Buck 119, and I feel like I'm just I keep reiterating the same things, but just in case some of you aren't watching some of the previous videos where I discuss, excuse me, hunting knives for bushcraft. And many of the knives that I reviewed, a lot of the bushcraft purists, if you will, they wouldn't be caught dead out there with a knife like this. Now, I'm not saying that I dislike Scandinavian ground knives, because that's not true. What I find that I don't really care for are thick Scandinavian ground knives. So if you get a Scandinavian ground knife that is as thick as this Buck 119, you have a very, very thick grind that I find is not good for much of anything unless you want to split down wood, which for the most part is not something that I do. So, it's about -10 out, and we're just going to show some of this. If I wanted to get some ridge poles, maybe some things like that. Shelter poles, tripods. Now this is maple that I'm going into here. We can see the power that's involved in this knife, and I have yet to have any issues with the cutting edge. As you can see, no problems going through something like that. This sheath will not retain the knife by friction. I'll talk more about that in a tabletop review. It is, however, a nice heavy leather sheath, though, with a plastic insert and a wheat pole in the bottom. But as I stated, the knife fits in there very loosely, and depending on what terrain you're in, it may rattle inside the sheath. I'm just going to clean this up here. Because of this high grind on here, which is part of the aspect of its geometry that makes it great at slicing, but because of this high hollow grind, it bites very nicely into wood, very deep, whereas your thicker Scandinavian ground knives will tend to back you out. And as I stated, this knife is plenty robust. There is countless testimony of the Buck 119, and there has been for decades. As with a lot of this style knife, right now it's just not a fad. So we'll just say that I want to make a few holes for a tripod. And maybe even perhaps a notch. Trying to keep the work in view of you. All right. So, like I had said, for myself, something like the guard doesn't really get in the way. Many people have commented on perhaps the delicate aspects of the tip. As I stated previously, something like that doesn't really bother me much because I do tend to like a delicate tip. And in my, what someone else may coin as delicate, I might not. But they get into some tight spaces. I mean, if you're doing small trap triggers, maybe you want to do a netting needle. Of course, it was designed more or less. I mean, you can get in the ribs of game with this knife, no problem. Get into the joints and break down game. It is fine enough where you probably could do smaller game as well with it. But the tip is great at puncturing. And as I've said, I've batoned this knife through frozen hardwood, knotty wood. I have made kindling. I have baton shelter poles, and I have struck ferrocerium rods. And I have done everything you could think of, you know, with this knife. Once again, thank you very much for watching. We'll have more with this knife. Hunting knives for Bushcraft, the old Buck 119. Take care.